Grand rich what?
Instigators.
Wait, what was the last thing you said though?
Rich.
Grand rich instigators.
Courting. COURTING, like dating.
So it's GRIC.
No, it was GRI, courting. That's what it transcribed. It was capital GRI, like it was
Oh.
an acronym. Did you not see this?
No, I saw. Where does the? I don't know where the courting comes from.
It was right after the GRI.
Oh, it just.
That's how they transcribed recording. They
Oh.
put GRI, courting.
This is going to be nonsense for anyone who's tuning in.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Sorry, I got distracted. I was trying to get my creative brain going.
So, welcome to the In the Boat with Ben and Rachel podcast. We are in the pre-show today because we got started a little bit earlier than normal. It's still 3 minutes until the official time when we're supposed to go live, but
here we are. It's because the kids have been gone all week.
Right. Yeah,
we've gotten so much done. I have.
Yeah. No, I've been more productive this week than I have been in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom, for taking the kids. I know they had a great time.
I'm not sure what that's about because yeah, I had a little bit more time. I think I know what it is. So when the kids are home, there's less unbroken time. There are more breaks throughout the day for one reason or another.
Reasons,
yeah. Sometimes there's a schedule thing, like an appointment we have to take somebody to. Sometimes it happens kind of during the handoff. So and I also think, I don't know, I think just maybe the stress.
I think it's knowing somebody else is caring for them takes a little bit of the stress off.
Yeah. So there's the stress of knowing that like it's
somebody else's problem.
Well, no, I'm saying, yeah, but I'm saying even when you're in charge, I don't necessarily feel that it's not because I know that my turn is coming.
Yeah.
That stresses me out when they're home.
My turn is coming.
I know my turn is coming.
My turn is coming.
That stresses me out. And it makes it sound like I don't enjoy raising our kids. I don't know. Does anybody genuinely enjoy the responsibility part of raising their children? Like,
we got in the discussion last week about like what it means to be an adult, and I'm like, I don't feel like I've gotten it figured out, but I think with kids it's like you have to pretend more that you have it figured out,
I wonder why do we feel that way? Why do we feel like we
have to pretend?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's value in saying like I don't know, and I say I don't know a lot, but I think it's more the actual raising of the child. Like it's trial by fire, Well,
that's what I mean. Who
told us we had to know?
Well, who are we trying to project that image to?
I don't know. The parenting police in general.
But there's
perfect parents.
There's nobody in our home.
Yeah.
Like we don't have cameras on.
Yeah, but when they go out into the world, it reflects on our parenting practices, and our values and all of that. So
yeah, I want to, like, in real life get into that conversation with you because I think there's a lot.
You probably care less about that than I do, but
oh, I definitely do care less about that.
Well, but so this is I mean, we would have to talk about this, but there is historically less pressure on the dad. Everything is blamed on the mom. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, everything. A kid's mental health, a kid's ADHD, a kid's autism diagnosis, like, it's all because of the mom.
This is an important conversation. So we should probably, I mean, we definitely need to have it, but I wonder if it would be good to actually put it out there too,
Yeah.
to like get into the nuances of it and stuff, because that's a really important point. And I think it's an important facet of the overall issue that has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
I think parenting is healthier in a lot of ways. But I also think that it's still pretty unhealthy in our culture.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, all right.
Heavy discussion for pre-show. That's what we do, right? That's our.
I guess that's our
That's our
yeah,
brand.
that's the shtick. So, yeah, so we're gonna now do a lighthearted discussion
Mhm.
about whether or not I want to show you the thumbnail I came up with. I'm not sure if I can find it actually. I'll find it. Give me a second. But basically the question is there such thing as a bad idea?
Oh, well, that's a little different framing than what I thought.
So how did you think it was going to be? I said no such thing as a bad idea.
I don't know. I mean, I can think of a lot of bad ideas, especially when it comes to ADHD kids.
Okay, so
But you're talking about creativity.
Well, this
Yeah.
is
Okay.
and to be fair, like I'm kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt that like they know that we talk about creativity and
Yeah,
stuff.
okay.
So
Just making sure.
yeah, it's not.
It is a bad idea to pee off the side of our van.
Is it though? I mean, is there a scenario where that's actually the best idea? So, but yeah, that is something that has happened with one of our children. It wasn't.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it.
It wasn't either of us, but
no. So yeah, so that's. It's a very simplistic way of putting what's a more complex idea because I needed to make it a title and a thumbnail. But like, is there such thing as a bad idea? Expands to when it comes to creative projects and any, given project you start working on, is there such thing as a project that is basically irredeemable,
yeah.
unfinishable, unpublishable? So that is what we're discussing today.
All right.
Very lighthearted compared to our pre-show conversation. All right. Well, let's get into it. Actually, I want to do one thing real quick because this has been bugging me. I'm sorry for our live listeners, all one of you who are tuning in right now. By the way, if you are tuning in, feel free to say hi in the chat. We'd love to say hi back. And we really, really love having people tune in and do this with us. It's a lot of fun. All right. So no, I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to wing it, but I need to write something for the intro of the show. This is the problem I have every time. I'm like trying to, go off the cuff. So we'll see what happens this time. It's an adventure. All right, here we go. Welcome to In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. I am Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
And this podcast, I just, now I'm like in my head.
Yeah.
This podcast exists to be an encouragement and a motivator for other creators Rachel and I speak from our own personal experience as parents of 6 children, creators who work from home full time and are trying to balance pursuing our creative passion with life and responsibility. And so we hope that as we talk about different things and share our experiences, you find yourself in our stories and feel encouraged and less alone on your creator journey.
Yeah.
So what I need to do now is I need to copy and paste the transcript of that
Yeah, there
and then
you go.
do a little bit of editing. Yeah.
And then just read it.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. Today we are talking about ideas, but specifically we're talking about creative projects. So really kind of this stage after the idea. You have the idea, you begin working on it. And the question on the table is there such thing as a creative project, as a creative idea that is unpublishable, that you should just abandon? And in my experience, I've had both kinds of things happen where like I do feel like, oh, I need to move on from this. I abandoned something for one reason or another. Or, I get to a point where I feel that kind of resistance and I'm not feeling very confident about the idea, but I push through anyway. Rachel's got an even more consistent track record of just pushing through and publishing stuff. And so I thought it would be a fun discussion to get into, because I think what a lot of creators experience when it comes to having creative ideas, when it comes to working on projects, is that many times we'll get to a place where we feel like, oh, I don't know, this isn't worth my time and my energy to keep working on this, because I feel like this is actually a bad idea. I feel like there's nothing I could do to polish this up to get it to a place where I could publish it and feel good about it. And maybe that's valid, or maybe that's something that you need to work to overcome. Who knows? And so I think in our discussion, you might find the answer to that question for yourself. So you want to jump into it?
Yeah.
All right. So what are your thoughts? Is there such thing as a project that is unfinishable, unpublishable, irredeemable? You gotta dump it and move on.
So I'm gonna revise a little bit what you and I talked about earlier, and just use a little qualifier here that obviously it depends. Like if you're if you're trying to write a misogynistic porn novel that, exalts the beating of women and stuff, yes, that idea is terrible. Like, do not publish it. But I'm thinking more along the lines of like, I don't want to say like sane people. I want to say like,
yeah. So
how
let's
do I say this?
Let's take all of the other legitimate disqualifiers
off
of the table.
Okay.
So your idea is not problematic. It's not oppressive.
It's not racist. It's not misogynistic.
Yeah,
it's not, all of those.
It's not the actual definition of a bad idea. But what you're experiencing is you have a sense that were you to see it through to completion, it would be a poorly constructed story or poorly constructed video, or it's missing pieces, or it's not structured the right way, and that the energy that it would take to right the ship is not worth it, or maybe not possible.
Well,
do you feel like that's a good
I feel like the whole possible thing, it's always possible. to write it. So what it comes down to is figuring out, do I care enough about this project to undergo revision? Because I feel like revision is where the shine happens. So if there is a project that, and I'm speaking from the experience of writing books, but I think it can be applied to other creative endeavors. If we're not willing to even start over from not scratch, but, have the same characters, but have a different trajectory for them or something, then it's probably an idea that we're not going to finish. But for me personally, even when I've gotten a feeling of this book is not quite working as I'm writing it, I still will finish it because I know that in revision, I can fix whatever is wrong with it. So I kind of had a different take than you do, that I feel like everything can be fixed. There's not anything. I know there are people out there who will give writing advice where they're like, if something isn't working, scrap the project and start on something else. But I'm like, I think maybe I just feel so connected to my characters that I can't stop the story and just leave it, Like I have to figure out how to make it work. So sometimes that means putting it aside there's a project that I'm bringing back out here at the end of the year that I wrote. I mean, it was 8 years ago, and it was actually the first project that I queried and got like tons of rejections. And when I brought it back out and read it, I was like, oh, I see why it was rejected, but I have fixed it. And so I'm going to release it on my own, but I feel like it's been fixed from where it was 8 years ago. So sometimes, there are these projects that we put aside, and when we become better writers, we can see what's wrong and we can fix it. Or sometimes it requires getting somebody else to look at it, to find some of those places where it could be better, or it could connect better with an audience or something. Yeah. So I think it's really funny because I tend to be a pessimistic person, but in certain instances, I feel like I'm the kind of person who's like, don't ever give up on it. I don't think I've ever had a project that I just didn't finish. And the one that I just referenced, I finished it, but it's never been published, and it's been like sitting on my hard drive for 8 years, but I don't ever give up on those things. Like, even if something has gone out on submission and it's never been picked up, I don't give up on those. They're always in the back of my mind, kind of in a file system where it's like, maybe it's time to bring this one back out and see, how I can massage it to be a little bit different. Or if sometimes it's just, it's just the market. So like, there's nothing wrong with whatever you've created. It's just your market.
I want to take this back a little ways to kind of the root of this conversation for us, because this is not just a conversation we've had recently regarding the kind of work we're doing right now, but it was even kind of a difference of opinion about songwriting, for example.
Oh yeah.
And so, you and I both were in a band together. We both wrote songs, and I was of the opinion, and I'll share my 2 cents in a minute, but I was of the opinion that, we could, if you wanted to write an album of like 10 great songs, you needed to write like 30 or 40 songs to find the best 10 to put on the album. And you might get to different places in the, like writing process of all of those songs. You might just write the lyrics for one. You might actually have like a full blown demo for others, kind of depending on where the song leads you. But in my mind, that was like, my thinking was, I got to trudge through as much bad ideas as it takes to get to the great ones. And those are the ones that deserve to be published. And you had a different take.
Yeah, who gets to say what's good and bad? Like, who gets to say which ones are the best? and those are the questions that I have. Like, just because they're not the ones that we picked for an album, and we would, we had reasons for picking the ones that we did for an album and the order in which we put them. But some fan somewhere would love to hear those ones that we never recorded, and that's kind of the way I think is, even if this doesn't appeal to the broader audience that we have, and who's to say whether or not it will. Like, it's so hard to know. You see all kinds of crap out there all the time that is like viral, and it's like nobody can predict these things. I feel like I'm saying like a lot. I need to cut that from my vocabulary. But it's it's one of those things where it's such a subjective thing. And obviously there are ways to write good songs. There are, techniques that we can use and ways to write good lyrics and things like that. But just because we wrote 40 and we picked 10, why can't we publish, quote unquote, publish the other ones? Why can't we share them in their raw form, which would show people some of the unfinished, like I guess I don't shy away from showing, well, with my books I do, like I want everything polished. But as far as a recording studio and those kinds of things, people don't care as much as we do, that. And I think about that when I'm thinking about the stories that I publish for kids. Sorry, I just spit on you. Kids just want to read a good, entertaining story. They could care less about how many times you use a metaphor for this or whatever. And of course I'm going to, make everything as perfect as I can make it. But that's all they're looking for, is a story. I mean, how many times have we read a story to our kids and been like, that wasn't all that great, They love it. They don't care. So those are the things that I think about when there comes that point in a project, or if there comes that point where I think, wow, something's really broken about this.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of fixing it. Like, I have such hope that it can be fixed,
So it sounds like you kind of have a more external perspective on the issue as it relates to the people who will ultimately consume, and not making a judgment about how good or bad something is for your audience. Almost like you're telling them what they should and shouldn't like by deciding which projects you'll finish and which ones you won't. So that's interesting to me, because I'm thinking of it a lot more from a more internal perspective.
Because where you decide what is good and what is bad.
Well, not necessarily. So there is that judgment, but the way that I think about it is, especially like in the circumstances that we're in with a lot of responsibilities and stuff, I feel this scarcity of our time and our energy. And I feel like some projects, and again, I think you could say this is pretty subjective still, but even if I feel subjectively that I'm wasting my time on something that's not going to be great at the expense of time that I could be spending on something else that I'm more excited about and motivated to finish, and those projects that I don't feel excited and enthusiastic about take twice as much energy from me as the ones that I'm like really excited about.
That makes sense. But let me ask you a question. How do you know what's going to be great?
Like I said, it's subjective. So it's less about whether or not it actually will be great, and more about
your
whether or not I feel like it will be great. If I feel like it will be great,
You have more energy to
I have
finish it.
I have more energy to finish it. And that's kind of the calculation I'm making. So in a given month, for example,
Yeah.
um, and this is just like me making up numbers, but let's say I say yes to every single project, and I really don't like half of them. That month I might publish 4 pieces because it's taking me extra time and energy, versus if I allow myself to say no, or to cut off, or to say I'm done with this project, I don't think it's going anywhere, I might do 5 because I was able to put my creative energy to use on projects that I was actually excited about, because again, subjectively, I believed they were going to be good.
Yeah.
And that's putting a lot of, and I will say, for my personality, I think a lot about what other people think
Mm-hmm.
about my work.
Yeah, I was
So I
going to mention,
do,
I feel like there's a little bit of a personality thing here too.
yeah, I do externalize that. And so in some ways that's bad, but I also think that it might help me to be a little bit more in tune with what people actually do respond to, because I'm so sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe that's me just trying to make myself feel better, but it sounds like a solid theory. I think
Yeah.
it'd be worth exploring.
Yeah, it could be.
So,
It's so the personality thing too, you're driven more by people's responses to what you create.
mm-hmm.
And I think for me it's more about the internal motivation and the accomplishment that I feel when I have finished a project. And I think that's what drives some of my, like, every project gets finished kind of thing. Whereas yours, it's easier for you to abandon. I think there are certain personality differences too, because when I start something, it's really, really hard for me to stop it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that just, I have values within myself where, like, you do what you say and you follow through. So those are big deals to me. And I don't know, maybe I make the judgment before I even start on a project. I've never really thought about that because I have a whole list of ideas which I've shared before, but I start on ones that I feel more passionately about or that are more relevant, and sometimes I make the decision based on what's the market looking for, even though that's a terrible because the market's always looking for something different by the time you're finished. but
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's there is a personality difference, I think, between you and me, but also other creators who are doing these things too. I would say though to be careful about using your feelings of not being as excited about it, because sometimes those are not accurate for, especially excuse me, especially with a project that takes a long time
Mm-hmm.
and feels tedious, because you can be really excited for it at first, and then once you get, we call this in writing the saggy middle, but once you get to that saggy middle, you're very much less excited
Yeah.
about it. And you just, I mean, for me, I just have to push through that. And what helps for me though is working on multiple projects at the same time, because if I'm feeling a little less excited about one, I can give it an hour in a day and then move on to something else that takes 2 hours, so kind of trick yourself into finishing. But
I want to get into another aspect of this, because I feel like you definitely have some experience and some wisdom to share with this, where it's not necessarily about how you feel about whether or not the idea is good or the story is good or whatever, but there are actual objective functional things that are wrong. Um, And I'll give an example from my own work. This is something that I experienced very recently, and I had an idea for a video, and the original idea was something that I was going to shoot different scenes for at different places on location with other people. It was going to be kind of a collaborative thing. Um, but it was a very last minute idea. So I didn't have a lot of time to.
Surprise, surprise. I'm just kidding.
Well, this is another thing. I'm gonna put down an idea for the In the Boat with Ben and Rachel podcast episode ideas. So it was about last minute
Planning.
last
Spontaneity.
minute,
That's what you should
yeah.
call it. Spontaneity versus. I'll have to figure out what the versus.
Well, because in this case, it's a situation where we've had this deadline for a long time. There was no like mandate for me to create this thing. It was just a creative idea that it just happened to pop into my head the day before this thing was going to launch.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
that would stress me out. Just the
yeah. So anyways, my first thought was like, oh, these different on location collaborating with other people. One of the ideas, or one of the places was going to be a car dealership.
Mhm.
So I actually called 10 different car dealerships that day, trying to see if there was
Oh my
one that would let me
gosh,
come
I
in
did
and do
not
this
know
thing I
this.
wanted to do. Not one of them said yes.
Yeah, of course.
My backup idea was to do everything myself, to myself play every character, and to do it all against a green screen. And technically speaking, okay, so logistically that's easier because you don't have to worry about all the different moving pieces and
Setting up cameras everywhere and
Right.
different locations. Yeah.
but technically speaking it's very challenging because you've got to get the angles right. You have to find backgrounds that work with whatever, shot you're trying to set up and stuff. And so and I was in a time crunch. So I was like, I shot everything. I found the backgrounds and I put together my first draft. And watching through it for the first time, I thought,
This is terrible.
This is terrible. I don't know if I have the skills to like polish this up and get it to a place where I would feel comfortable sharing it with people. I showed it to you when it was in that state, and you didn't make any, statements about the quality of it or anything. But I think I even said to you then, I was like, it's gonna take
Yeah,
some
you
work to
did.
polish this up.
Mhm.
And at that point, I was seriously considering just like abandoning it because nobody was asking me to do it. It wasn't
Yeah.
like nobody was expecting me to have this thing put together. But I decided to push through, and the closer I got to the finished product, the more I could see, oh, I do have the skills and I do know the things that I need to do to make this look right. I know what I can cut out and what I can leave in. I know how to, add things and supplement. And then I also I understand that part of what makes it entertaining is in some ways the poor quality. So that's
So you embrace that ironically.
that's kind of part of the joke, especially with me playing all of the characters.
Yeah.
So so that's an example of one that had some real technical issues that I feel like I could have abandoned and felt justified in doing so. But I'm really glad I pushed through. So I want to hear if you have any stories like that. Before you get into it, I'm going to plug the computer in so that it doesn't die in the middle of our stream.
Oh yeah, that would be good. and he just reappears. So stories of like wanting to abandon a project because you know there's so much wrong with it.
Not necessarily wanting to abandon it, but getting to a place in the project where you realize there are technical problems that need to be overcome, and that maybe like they were bad enough that it gave you pause.
There are lots of stories like that. So the book that's actually publishing next summer, I rewrote. I can't even tell you how many times, but it started as a prose story, and I remember getting to the end of it and being like, I am doing so much telling instead of showing. And knowing that there were, I write everything by hand. So I don't make judgments about it until I'm, getting it on the computer, and it kind of serves as my second draft where I'll put editorial notes and stuff in it. But I remember transcribing that one and being like, this is so bad. And I'm not really sure why. It's a very, very personal story, and I think it was just really, really hard to write. But so I put it away for like a year, I think. And then it kept coming back to me as you really need to figure out how to fix this story. So, I mean, my process, I do a lot of revision, and things are, I have a keen eye, I feel like, for the things that are wrong, especially when I take time away and then, approach it again. So I read it through again and I thought, it's a hard story. It needs to be a story in verse. So I rewrote it from the beginning and turned it into poetry. And then I still wasn't satisfied after that, and was feeling just so kind of downtrodden and stuff, because I thought, I've done the two things that I know to do. Now what's wrong with it? Like, what am I doing wrong? Am I, so I put it away for probably another year, and then took it out again, and it started spilling out in journal entries that were humorous and, just a little more lighthearted, but still had the hard story at the center of it. And as I was doing that, I thought, this is exactly what works. And it's really hard to figure out, like, what is I know writing technique. I know plot, I know voice, I know all of the terms that you're supposed to know. But when it's your own work, it's hard sometimes to put your finger on what exactly is wrong. But I think for me, I just never give up on those things, even as I'm reading through and I think, this is such a bad story. There's an adult thriller that I wrote years ago for my newsletter people, and I would give them a chapter, every time I sent out a newsletter. It's terrible. But lately I've been like, I need to take that back out and, make my editorial notes and figure out what's wrong with it and rewrite it, because it has good bones. And I think that's what it is for me, is I can see, it's almost like the X-ray vision, like you see through to the bones, and maybe the flesh isn't quite what, it should be. So you have to resculpt and those things. So, I mean, there are projects halfway through where I've thought, this first person voice is not working. I'm going to turn it into third. And I'll just, like, from the halfway point, I'll start writing it in third person and just put a note on it where I say, okay, make sure you turn the first half of this into third person, if it feels like it works, or switch from past tense to present tense, or vice versa. So, I mean, I don't think there are definitely times that I've thought, I need to put this away for a while, but I don't know that there are any times that I've thought, I'm never going to finish this,
Yeah. So that, what you just described, seems a little bit out of character for you in some ways. I'm going to use kind of as a metaphor, songwriting. Sounds like you wrote a song, and as you're kind of creating the actual melody and the music for the song, like, you're working through it, and halfway through you decide, no, wait, this is not a folk song. it's a pop song.
Yeah.
And so like you write the rest of it as a pop song.
Yeah. It's like a Frankenstein.
Yeah. And that sounds fine to me because I know I can go back. But like for someone of your personality, I think of like, oh, that I wonder if that like, does that get to you at all, or is it because of your experience?
I think because of my experience, because I've seen so many turn, make a good turn where like the project was originally not very good, and then halfway through I change it, and then I always know that I'm going to do more than one revision. So I think when I'm drafting, it doesn't ever feel finished. Like the project is not finished until I say it's finished, and sometimes that takes 20 drafts, sometimes it takes 3. So
when there's something I think about being a writer that gives you an advantage in some ways too, because when it comes to other types of like
mediums,
thinking about the creators that we're speaking to specifically who write blogs, or they have a newsletter, or they're producing videos, or they're sharing artwork or something like that. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to put something out that's finished, to publish something consistently in a relatively short amount of time, regardless of what your circumstances are. So, like there's the kind of, I think in the mind of the creator, there's the same expectation of your output for a person who has a family and a full-time job, who's doing this on the side, as somebody who's single and like can basically spend all day if they want to just doing this one thing. And that's not to say that the person with no family and no full-time job might not have other things going on, but just I'm giving the whole spectrum. And I think what happens, and this is where I find myself, because I feel like both, in my job, because we're marketing a product and we're trying to grow our business, and I have an expectation on myself. The people who I work for have an expectation on my time. But even before I started working there as a creator, for the longest time, I've just had this thought in my head that if I'm not producing something, if I'm not publishing something that's a finished product once a week, I'm not doing enough. Pardon me. And that pressure makes it feel like I can't afford to go back and do whatever number of revisions it takes. Hold on, I'm very sorry about this. Just stuck right there. Okay. Because what's really attractive to me about what you're describing is the first draft doesn't have to be perfect. I love the idea of that. I was putting together for a video that I was making for Podia, I built this fake brand that was essentially an online course about songwriting. And so I actually wrote an outline for the course and like the different lessons. And one of the things I put in the outline, it helps that I've had some experience with songwriting, but one of the things I put in the outline was like, write a bad song. If you find yourself as you're writing lyrics, because this happens to me all the time when I'm writing lyrics, as you're writing lyrics, if you find yourself stuck, like, okay, I did the first verse, I did the chorus, I'm going into the second verse, I know I need to like tie it in, but like tell the next part of the story, and it's got a rhyme,
a lot of
like
pressure on it.
and it's like I don't know what to do. And so like my advice in that section was make up some nonsense lyrics.
Yeah.
Just like write a second verse.
Yeah.
Or, like say what you're trying to say in that second verse,
Exactly,
but
but don't rhyme it.
don't try to make it rhyme.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's what I used to do when I wrote all of,
Because
all those songs.
objectively, like, you'll get through that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a bad song. Like,
But it can be made good.
yeah, people would look at the lyrics and they'd be like, that doesn't,
The
that's
first
not
draft
really,
of lyrics.
yeah, exactly. Because where you make something great is in the revision process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you're on that tight of a deadline, trying to put things out that consistently, and you have limited time, you sometimes don't have enough time to go through that process.
Okay, so I do want to say something about that too, because I was a newspaper reporter for a long time. So the story I would be assigned would be due by the end of the day. Sometimes it was due earlier than that. And I think the place that I came to at that point was, I can do my best with this story, and it would still, it'd still take multiple drafts. Like the first draft I would do. So there was this guy who came from the Poynter Institute, which is like a big journalism school kind of thing. And what he said was like, you write everything on that first draft. And then the second draft, you go in and you like perfect every sentence and every quote and you cut and all of these things. And that was probably, I mean, I was, what was I, 22 when I started working as a professional reporter. I did reporting all through college and stuff. But that was like huge advice for me, because prior to that, I would always try to write the perfect story the first time,
Yeah.
as if somebody was like looking over my shoulder thinking, oh, look at the things she's writing. They didn't have to see it until I was finished with it. So that was like a huge deal. But in a small amount of time, like I had a few hours in a day. Sometimes I would go out on an assignment at 3 and the story would be due by 5, So I think training myself to do that quickly, and then having a thought in my head where I said, you know what, this is the best I can do today, but tomorrow I get to be better because I just put in the practice for today.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important concept to keep in mind when you are publishing and creating things on, a daily basis or a weekly basis or something that doesn't have a whole lot of time, is just thinking you do have to have an end to that. And it may be your best today, but you will be at least 1% better tomorrow because you did the work today,
Yeah. And what I think, what I'm extracting from what you just shared too, is a concept that I think it takes a lot of creators years to understand, and some never do, because a lot of what we do as creators comes back to writing. It comes in some form or another. And what I have done for the longest time and still am trying to work past is what you're describing, that like I have to write the perfect first draft.
I tell you this all the time, don't I?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
just get it down. So it doesn't have to make sense.
So when I'm writing my scripts for my videos, I'm like and it's this mentality that it's a waste of time for me to write this poorly on the first.
It's a waste of time to try to make it perfect.
Because
the first time.
And I want to make this more than just like a theoretical whatever, because the mental processing it takes to go through and write your first draft as if you're editing something, you're basically spending editing energy on something that doesn't exist yet. And so you're trying to do two things at once. And what happens ultimately is you're very likely in danger of taking longer to produce the full thing.
Yep.
And it's not going to be as good. Because what happens when you you can't get there. Like you can get a little bit faster, because I've seen it happen with myself. I can write my first draft and edit it as I'm going.
That's so much energy.
Yeah. I can do that faster today than I could when I first started out,
Yeah.
but it's still very slow.
Yeah.
It's and if I get stuck, like I'm stuck. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, if I don't say the right thing here, I know I don't have another pass at this. Is
Oh
the
my
thought
gosh, that would
is
be
the thought
so
that I have in my
stressful.
mind. What writing a first draft should feel like is you the words just flow out of you
Mm-hmm.
and you don't judge them. You don't think about whether or not it's a well structured sentence or paragraph or whether or not your ideas are organized the right way. You don't even think about like you might have done an outline before that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like the overall it might be well structured in terms of how you present your ideas throughout the piece.
But the writing is, yeah.
But that should be so fast and it should be so sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
And even that over time, like if you feel that sensation of writing something that quickly, it changes things. And then you you go back and you do the same thing that you were doing before, except this time you're actually editing something that
That's already
it's
there.
already there.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, what is there for you to edit is better and better and better. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think in the short term it speeds you up, but definitely in the long term, oh, it speeds you
Yeah.
up. So
And here's a little nugget for people if they're, uncomfortable with this whole write it as fast as you can. And so I write most of my stories by hand. And if anybody were to ever see my journals, my writing journals, you'll see little things like something like this, or you'll see this is really bad. We need to clean it up. Like I speak in the, we need to clean this up. Or I'll have a note that says, make sure you describe the place here because I don't have the time to like describe it when I'm doing the first draft, but
mm-hmm.
that's what the second draft is for. So those I put those notes right into my stories. So like if somebody finds one of my writing journals one day and they're reading it, they will see all of these like terrible notes that, help me in the next draft. So I would encourage people to do stuff like that. Have these little placeholders here where I know there was one recently where I went through and I just said fighting scenes here, because
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have the capacity to like
Well, because if you recognize and that's the other thing about writing that way is it's a lot easier to recognize when something is pulling you when something is in danger of pulling you out of that flow.
right, exactly.
Because it's
Mhm.
like if I have to go into my like high processing mode here, it's going to stop me dead in my
And
tracks.
that's what editing is. It's
Yeah.
a it's a different it's a different part of the brain that you use when you edit and when you revise. So that's why, the writing is it requires a totally different brain, which is why you get stuck.
Yeah. And ironically, when it comes to editing video, I do this really well because I do my first pass edit and the only thing I care about is where I'm making the cuts and getting rid of extraneous stuff and making sure that everything just from a content perspective is flowing really smoothly. I don't worry about putting animations or graphics or like positioning the frame a certain way or I don't think about any of that stuff because I can't I can't really do any of that stuff efficiently until I've got at least this baseline edit finished. And
Yeah.
that's kind of a
I mean,
similar
it's
thing.
it's like it's like building a house. You have to have the frame before you can put in the walls, before you can put the facade, the outer facade on. So it's like all of these. I kind of see it as layers. Like every draft is a new layer of brilliance.
And so back to I want to take this all the way back to the main
Yeah.
topic. So back to first of all the idea of not having enough time. I think it's really important to prioritize for any of your projects having those two different modes, that first draft mode and that editing mode, and that editing mode is like your first revision. So just one first draft, one revision. That's all you really have to commit to. And then if you can, time-wise, add more revisions onto that process, because in your first revision, you might, if you're writing a blog article, for example, you might clean up the first sentence and make it really grab the reader, and you might fix the last paragraph and make a great closing statement. And then in the second revision, you might actually be able to find opportunities to tell a more interesting story, or add more color to your language, or so there are a lot of different things that those revisions allow you to do. But even if you're just able to write the first draft and just make that first revision, I think what that ends up doing is it puts you in a situation with your projects and ideas where you don't feel like you have to abandon them.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that may be a satisfying answer.
It also gives you, if you do at least two, like if you get the first draft and then you do the revision, it gives you an idea of, well, is this publishable? Is this, you just get a better idea. And for me, the answer is always, I'll do more revisions and see it through to whatever would make it publishable or make it a good idea, but I think time-wise and commitment-wise, people have to make that decision for themselves, because if they're not quite as fond of it or something like that, I can totally see abandoning something because they feel like it's not a great idea,
Yeah. Or, and this is, I think what you're describing, where like you put something away and it might be a year or years before before you pick it up again. That sort of feels like the same thing, because you're not, what you're not doing is you're not saying, oh, this is never going to see the light of day.
Right.
What you're acknowledging is that this isn't ready yet. And at some point in the future, I may be able to do more revisions with more experience, with more expertise, and get this to a place where I feel excited about publishing it and sharing it with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Growth is important too, I have a friend who wrote a picture book 10 years ago, and she just periodically would take it out and kind of fiddle with it. And she just got it published like recently, but it took 10 years for a picture book that's like 500 words, but that's creativity. That's being a creator,
Last year, almost a year ago, I said I wanted to write some new songs and maybe release an EP. So I'm still working on that. have several half-written songs.
Yeah.
That I just need to I need to follow my own advice and just
need to pick
let them be
up.
bad songs.
Yeah.
At first.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and call it and say that was a good, constructive conversation.
Yeah.
And we, back in the days when we were writing songs together, we both felt very passionately about our positions on the subject.
We would argue vehemently about it.
Yeah. So I feel like this was a very.
That's why we stopped doing music. I'm just kidding.
No, it was the kids. Too many kids. No, it was a good civil conversation.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for tuning in, those of you who watched live. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you can check out the show live at youtube.com/Ben Tolson. We stream every Friday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. And yeah, we'd love to see you. Danny just said hi in the chat. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Danny.
Good to see you, Danny. And you can also go to intheboatpodcast.com. We share our episodes there, and also on any other podcast streaming platform. We're there. So
yep.
If you want to find Rachel, where can they go?
I'm at racheltolson.com.
And I am at bentolson.com and at Ben Tolson on all of the things. Thanks for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.
See ya.
All right, after show time.
Quick after show.
We pick the kids up again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
Aaron.
Hey, Aaron.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've written songs together.
Mm-hmm.
I think we still have a folder, actually, of songs that never, that you and I both wrote. I think the majority of them were mine, but...
Yeah.
But then I think our difference is I stopped writing songs because I was like, what's the point?
Oh, because I was, well, yeah.
There were some good ones, though, that we never actually shared together. So I think we always planned on doing more, but then we had twins, and it was like everything was turned upside down.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we do need to, like, we'll have to unpack that one of these days. Like,
yeah.
Why did the music die?
The music didn't die. It just, yeah.
Well, so like I'm trying to get back into writing music again and stuff, but there's not really, like I've kind of opened the door for us to do it together, and you seem pretty content with what you're doing and not super interested and that's okay.
I mean, I could be I think it's just more of a time and energy kind of thing.
Yeah.
For me, like things are going well with writing and publishing books, and so it feels well. And I never really enjoyed the gigging part of it, where I had to like be out somewhere and with all of these people, and you would make me go run the merch table, which meant everybody would come talk to me, and I'd be so exhausted by the time we got done. It's not that I don't love, talking to the people who came to our gigs and stuff. It's just that by the time I was done expending energy on stage, I would have to like engage in introverts, we hate small talk and being in large crowds. And so I think it was like an energy thing for me. I went into like energy preservation, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that's, that's an important, because that's a part of it that I love and miss the most.
Yeah.
I enjoy writing songs. It's very satisfying, like recording a song and
that's my favorite
getting
part.
to hear it and getting to share it with other people. But performing the song in person and getting to tell the story about the song in person, like, and just performing in general, like I could be playing other people's songs and I would have a great time.
So we were just diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
I think it was easier for me to handle before we had children, though, because, children suck energy from you. And so it was like I was constantly in energy deficiency mode, So.
Yeah.
It's hard. But I don't ever want to hold you back. So like,
Yeah, I know. Well, and I'm doing a good enough job of that myself. So
holding back.
Holding myself back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
we'll get into it one of these days.
Yeah. And we should dust off some of those old songs. Mm-hmm. Or you should at least.
Yeah.
So.
No, I don't look back.
I did write a song recently for.
Bye, Danny.
A story or a book I was writing.
Yeah.
So we might have to put it into, you know, into the recorded songs.
You know, that's one thing we didn't get into is I feel like when you saying that reminded me of something, because it's like uh, when you write a book, um, or if you're writing songs or making videos or whatever, like there are a lot more ways to share those behind the scenes pieces. There's a musician I follow called Karuk. I think it's how it's pronounced. And the very first video I saw was like, it was a fully produced music video, really well done. I enjoyed the song a lot. The music video is funny and interesting. And so I followed their YouTube channel. They only have, I think, like even right now, they've only got a couple thousand subscribers. But like such a great musician.
Yeah.
And then she started sharing these YouTube shorts, and it's just like little clips of songs that she's working on, not anything that she's got completely finished. And I'm loving it, because it's like, oh,
it's like an inside.
Yeah, I get to see the process. Now it does take, you know, like it takes some energy to put those together and to put them out there. And, you know, there's also like, you have to get over feeling like, oh, this isn't unfinished. What are people going to think? But there are a lot of ways to share even songs that like maybe you are going to put on the back burner, that like, okay, that doesn't like this. All I have is a verse and a chorus, and like I've written an acoustic part for it, and I'm just going to share that one piece with you, and that's going to be it. And that might be the only way it ever sees the light of day.
Yeah.
But that's something you can do now so easily compared to back in the day when it was like, nope, unless you put it on an album or share it in the middle of a concert, which, you know, might be weird. Like, I've got a half a song I'm going to show you that you can't buy from the merch table or anything. So anyways, I think that's kind of a positive on the side of like not necessarily abandoning an idea. All right. We're going to get going.
Yep.
Thanks again for watching, and see you guys next time.
All right.